Good morning, everybody. I'm Amanda Phillips. I'm the site director at Woodlawn and Pope-Leighey House, where we love to use makers and creators to help us with our programming and interpreting the full story at our historic site. Today, I am so excited to welcome Jennifer Clements, who was one of the first writers in residence in our summer program that we do with Arcadia Food and Inner Loop DC. And she was a game changer at our property with her set of poems. And they made a huge impression on us as a staff, on our visitors, and on the site as a whole. And her poems, she came on in the summer in 2016, and her poems are still up in Woodlawn's music room today. So I am more than delighted to welcome Jennifer this morning. So good morning.
Good morning. I don't think I realized that they were still on display. That's amazing to hear.
They're not only on display, but they've actually changed from frame to beautiful golden frames, and they sit right under Nellie's portrait above the harpsichord. Yeah. So Jennifer has moved on in so many ways since we last saw her, but is a poet and writer and playwright and managing director of Theater Alliance here in DC. And I think my very first question for you is, I think I'm right in that when you came to the site, you had an idea about what you might like to do in the week of residency that you had there, and that everything kind of turned on its head once it started raining. So would you like to talk just a little bit about that before we have you read a little something?
Sure. Yeah, no, when I came into the residency, I did so thinking I would be spending that time working on a play that a company in Falls Church had commissioned me to write. And that work was set in roughly the same time period. And I thought the spirit of the house would sort of evoke something helpful. And in fact, there was one day where it was raining and I was sitting right near the fireplace looking at the fire screen, and the energy of Woodlawn kind of kept nudging me and going, you thought you were going to write this other piece. And that's cute that you thought so, because actually, here's the thing that you should be writing about, and here's why. And once I stopped kind of resisting and forcing the other project to happen, it wasn't going to happen in that moment. Then the sequence of poems that I ended up working on came sort of fast and furious in that space, and it's always a neat experience when that happens, and when the energy of the place kind of says, here's the inspiration, whether you're looking for it or not, here it is, and this is where it should be.
That's great. So I'm going to give a little context to the people watching in that Woodlawn Mansion is the home of Nellie Park Custis Lewis, who was the stepdaughter of George and Martha Washington, and Woodlawn was her first family residence. And she was known to be quite talented in all kinds of domestic skills at the time, including needlework. And it turns out that her needlework probably surpassed all her other talents, and Woodlawn still today has a collection of her needlework. And you happen to be sitting right near a fire screen that Nellie designed, actually, and then also stitched when your creative juices started flowing. So would you like to read just a little bit of one of those poems?
Sure. Let's pull this up here. There are 4 different parts of this, but I'm only going to read the first part here. The piece is called The Needlework Variations, and this is variation 1. Every stitch counted, woven histories like petticoat folds beneath your muslin gown. We are meant for making. Spill your words, a sampler, a grammar, a craftsmanship of letters, cousin to embroidery, or filigree, or plain work, or painting. It is a feminine trait to absorb and reshape, to ornament the world not in beauty, but in meaning and constraint, to dispatch parts of self enveloped to others, and like colonial children, 3 of every 7 fail to thrive. We do this for those that may endure.
It's beautiful. So, Jennifer, the amazing thing about that beautiful poem, which still resonates with me, honestly, as deeply as it did the first time that I saw it and read it and heard you give it, was that it was really the theme. It became very quickly the theme of the year of the Needlework Show that we do annually every year in March. We saw you the summer before, and by that following March, you were not only your poem was on the cover of the program, but also quotes from all the lines were all over the house in between this gorgeous needlework that other people had submitted. And we had some Nellie's needlework out that year as a result as well. So it was a game changer in a sense for us and gave us this opportunity to talk about Nellie in a really different way. I think all of the staff honestly felt after your poems that you kind of changed the way we thought about her. And we thought differently, honestly, about the act of making and needlework. And I think that's continued at Woodlawn. You have a lot to do with our sort of focus, if you will, on making to this day at the mansion. So how does it feel from your perspective to have had that kind of impact in a place, an iconic place, but also a place of great historical significance?
I mean, that's definitely humbling to hear, and I don't think I knew until this moment that was the case. But I think for any artist, one of the most important or most driving reasons for doing what we do is to put our work in conversation with something bigger. And so it's extremely rewarding to hear that these poems and the thinking behind them is serving as that tether to both the past and the future.
So, Jennifer, I think one of the things that had such a deep meaning for us at the property was this idea that women are often women makers especially are often the keeper of the history. So women who stitched were often stitching history and thinking about the connection in their families and trying to write that story, and their relationship in a sense to the house itself as well. And I think perhaps that's what, had such a big impact on us in terms of your poetry. Is that where it came from? Were you inspired by that idea, or was it something completely different?
No, absolutely. I think one of the other really striking images that I culled early on from the mansion was that fantastic family tree that is, 4 or 5 feet tall and framed. Mm-hmm. This microscopic handwriting tracing, I don't even know how many generations of this family. And I probably still have images of it on my phone because I took macro and micro. But that idea of chronicling the passage of time and the stories within that time and how that plays out in what is the official documentation in something like a family tree versus what are the craftsmanship traditions that are handed down through, say, mothers and daughters and learning to embroider. And I remember speaking to the archivist on site, and she showed me some of the things that Nellie had made and things that Nellie would send to friends of hers. I think she made bookmarks, and she would send these bookmarks to people all over the country because she wanted that connection outside of the property. But in so doing, she was also creating this legacy of making that is spread beyond the borders of the property. And so, yeah, that in tandem with other things that I was seeing all across the house and histories definitely spoke to what inspired those the poems.
I think it's interesting you say that because I do like to tell every artist, maker, creator, everybody that kind of comes through the house, the visitors, even the wedding guests, and of course the staff, they are now the history of the house. And I think it's easy for people to forget that the minute you enter a property, you automatically become part of its history. And I think we've had so many people come through both Woodlawn and the Pope-Leighey house, the Frank Lloyd Wright house that we have on our site as well, that, the second you're there interacting with its story, you become part of a new story. And your work has certainly done that. So tell us, you've moved on. It's been quite a bit of time since you were there, and tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, and the kinds of things perhaps you did in that interim time, and then we can talk a little bit more about the future.
Well, the through lines have definitely been writing and theater, and I continue to write and publish literary works, and I also write plays for the stage. I've had a few of those at things like the Kennedy Center's Stage to Stage Festival, and then as a complement to the artistic work, I'm an arts administrator and I'm the managing director of Theater Alliance, which is a professional theater company based out of the Anacostia Playhouse. So
great place.
Tentacles of the same driving forces.
Yeah, which is great. So I think many of us are, empathetic and sympathetic to the plight of live performance at the moment, which is really difficult. Although I think we're all getting very used to Zoom versions of everything, and enjoying that. But how do you think, obviously it's affected you in many, many ways to be going through this period, but how do you think, has it impacted the actual writing and the work you're putting on paper during this time?
Well, yes and no. And the answer behind both of those is that I haven't actually been writing as much in quarantine as I might have thought. I have been taking old works and submitting those for publication. I had an essay come out on Quail Bell magazine about a week ago, but I don't feel inspired to write about the current moment, but I'm too distracted by the current moment to really write about something completely separate. So I've put that on the back burner, and I've been exploring other media in this moment and doing more painting and tactile expressions, which has been refreshing and slightly outside my norm.
That's great. So I hope we get to see some of that work in the future as well. And maybe you can show off a little bit of that tomorrow. Jennifer will have her video to sort of read some more of her poetry and talk a little bit about her process. But and we really, really look forward to that. So it was such a delight to have you with us today. I'm beaming because I'm just sort of thinking about those poems and what they did really for our property, which was very impactful, not just for the Needlework Show, but as I said, just in order, the way that we're able to tell Nellie's story and the story of domestic work, and what that meant for different women who were at Woodlawn at that time. And we really, really appreciated the work that you did there, and looking forward to so much more. So thanks for joining us today. And we're really happy that you were part of this Maker and Creative initiative for us.
Well, thank you for having me in 2016 and your first cohort of writers in residence. And thank you for having me with you today.
No, that's great. And for people who want to look at more about the Writers in Residence program, it's all on our website, and we hope you'll take a look. It's under the Inner Loop Summer Residency Program tab. It's very easy to find all writers, and you'll see that Jennifer is one of the very first. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.